Testing. Okay. All right. We'll be started shortly. Oh, okay. Looks like you just came in from the rain too. Yeah. I know. Too bad for the farmers, you know, fires. Lindsay's on too. Lindsay's on. Okay. All right. We call the October 15th, 2020 Board of Public Works and Safety to order. Appreciate everyone being out here today. So we're going to move through these agenda items fairly quickly so we can get to the agenda items that I assume most of you are concerned about. So bear with us as we move through just kind of some standard business items, and then we'll get on to the task at hand. So there are no additional items, I assume, Chris? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to resolutions, we have a request to approve a resolution approving a curb cut for a single-family residence at 13981 East 116th Street. Mr. Taylor?
Good morning. For the record, Jason Taylor, Director of Engineering. Before you is a curb cut on 116th Street. It's east of Oleo Road. This is for, as stated, a single-family residence. This is actually a retroactive. There was a building permit that was issued for this property that allowed them to do a curb cut, but it was caught in the fact, or after the fact, that we needed to bring that to the board due to it being 116th. This is a little unique area. East of 116th is not the same type of corridor as what the rest of 116th Street is. Be happy to answer any questions for you.
Are there any questions or concerns for Jason? Not for me.
No.
Jeff? I didn't
No.
have any issue with this. I mean, this is east of the majority of the traffic in Fisher, so I don't find this to be a concern. Is there a motion to entertain the resolution? So moved.
Motion.
Motion by Jason. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries. Next is a request to approve a resolution dedicating a portion of Exit 5 Parkway as public right-of-way as part of the crew headquarters and car wash commercial project. Jason?
As part of our standard process with development, through our thoroughfare plan, development is required to dedicate right-of-way per that thoroughfare plan, and this is through the Technical Advisory Committee. It was identified that Exit 5 Parkway, there was a small section of right-of-way that needed to be dedicated. This is the formal process, bringing it to the board to accept that right-of-way into the city's inventory.
So is this a turn lane, or what?
No, this is cleaning up the right-of-way such that it was at a varying distance off of the center line, and it's making it a consistent based off of the center line or roadway alignment.
I see. Any other questions for Jason? No.
No.
Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Jeff. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next is a request to approve an amendment to our Health Participating Employer Agreement. Ethan.
Good morning. For the record, Ethan Lee, Director of Human Resources. I'm here to request approval of an amendment to our Health Participating Employer Agreement. Our Health is the city's provider for near-site health clinic for our employees on the city's health plan along with their dependents. Our current agreement with Our Health is ending at the end of this year. This amendment would extend it for an additional year. With this amendment, the rate fee for services provided by Our Health would go up 3% from the previous year. It's approximately, with our current population, $400,000 annually. It should be noted that
It would go up 3%.
3% from the previous year. Yeah.
Okay.
And so it should be noted that Our Health is currently going through a name change, becoming Marathon Health, just as a side note as part of this. Any questions?
Did they have escalators each year in our previous contract?
They did, yeah, every.
And what were those?
It was 3%.
3%? Any additional questions?
Ethan, do you have any stats on how frequently this is used? So, what's the true cost savings to the city by providing a health center on average?
You have utilization rates.
Yeah, so, let's see, I don't know if I have those specific stats, but we are high above their average, I guess I could say, as
Okay.
far as their book of business. We continue to exceed that number as far as our participation rate.
One of the reasons, Jason, we didn't extend or renew for a longer-term contract is that we've hired a third-party consultant to review all of our healthcare programs and provide that return on investment calculation before we enter into any long-term contracts. Because to answer your question, we want to find out whether this investment is sound or not. I can tell you from the employee's perspective, it's a very popular benefit to be able to use the clinic, but we want to make sure that we're at least breaking even on that notion. So we should have that, I think, in the
We're
next
looking
few
at the
weeks,
end of
I
the
would think. Yeah. So hopefully we'll have more to report on that. That's why this is only a one-year renewal and not a
Okay,
longer-term
gotcha.
contract.
And actually, 2019, our engagement was 60% of our employees who are eligible to use it, so more than half engaged with the clinic.
Does it dispense, is it a pharmacy as well?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, any employee that goes there can get their pharmaceuticals at no cost, and the clinic is at no cost to them.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we utilize something similar here, and it's that pricing is pretty consistent, actually pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, we've done the calculations for anecdotally on if an individual were to go to a clinic and do the same thing versus going here, per case basis, it saves money, but you have to have decent utilization, or otherwise you're just paying for something that no one's utilizing.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the one-year extension.
So moved.
Moved by Jason, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ethan. Next is a request to approve Fall 2020 Farmers Market Vendor Agreement. Andrew.
For the record, Andrew Myers, Operations Manager, Parks and Recreation Department. Before you, you have the Fall 2020 Vendor Agreement for our Fishers Farmers Market for your approval. Essentially the same contract we've used there for the last 2 years. The only substantial change this year is we've removed some of the tent requirements, as the market will not have tents this year. It'll be virtual or indoors only.
So is the market, the fall market, going to be in Holland Park, or is it just literally going to be virtual?
It's going to be virtual.
Okay.
Vendors will drop off their orders to the Parks Department, and Parks employees will deliver those orders. We've been doing it for the whole summer's market, but in addition to a physical market, so it will be just virtual for the winter or fall.
Gotcha. Any questions for Andrew?
So still the same process of asking, getting approval on goods sold, so we don't have any situations like other communities have had? Okay.
Yeah, I think you're still vetting all the vendors and making sure that
Okay.
they're not buying the stuff from Walmart and then saying it's homegrown.
Correct. They
Right.
still are following the same procedures as always, but they have to provide the materials themselves. They can't buy from a middleman.
Okay.
Any additional questions?
No.
Seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion.
Moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think we've gotten through the the standard business of Board of Public Works and Safety, and we'll move on to 5G. Appreciate everyone coming out today to share their opinions on the locations of these towers. Just so you know how we tend to handle these, we've gone through a number of these already. The ones that we've had concern or feel that need further review, we often table those and ask both the neighborhood and the 5G company to go back and review and evaluate whether or not there's a better option for everyone involved. Our hope and intent is by the time that it gets to our board that the residents and the people that need to be notified have been notified so that they can share their concerns and voice their concerns. We've also tried to create and construct an opportunity for residents to work directly with the vendors. This is all available to you, and we have the ability to do this because we are one of only 100 communities to have passed an ordinance that even gives you a voice in this. Otherwise, federal preemptive law actually started as state preemptive law, basically ties the hands of any local community to interfere with the deployment of 5G towers. And this has been an ongoing struggle that I battled at the state legislature for many years, trying to make sure that locals had some sort of voice. And we have a limited voice here, so I'm going to ask Chris Greisel, our city attorney, just to share a little bit with you about what we have the ability to weigh in on and the influence on, and then we'll go ahead and entertain these. Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what we can consider in this conversation?
Sure. So I think the mayor summarized it very succinctly. I mean, in short, the city's regulatory authority is extremely limited, and it's largely preempted by federal law under the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Congress tasked the FCC with creating rules for the implementation of telecommunications consistent with the Act. The Act in general prohibits states and local governments from regulating the placement, construction, and modification of personal wireless facilities on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that such facilities comply with regulations contained within the Act. In Indiana, as the mayor mentioned, the placement of small cell facilities and the associated supporting structures and the public right-of-way are considered a permitted use and is exempt from local zoning review, so long as the total height of the structure supporting the small cell facility doesn't exceed the greater of 50 feet measured from grade, or the height of any utility pole in place on a date certain within 500 feet plus an additional 10 feet. With respect to the construction, placement, or use of any small cell facility and associated supporting structure, the city is prohibited from limiting the placement of small cell facilities by minimum separation distance or maximum height limitations, imposing unreasonable requirements regarding the maintenance or appearance of the facility and the associated supporting structure, limiting the duration of any permit that is granted, and prohibiting an applicant from locating a small cell facility, wireless support structure, or utility pole in a residential area. In accordance with Indiana law, the city has established this waiver process, as the mayor mentioned, whereby telecommunication providers may seek to deploy small cell facilities in residential areas through the city's Board of Public Works and Safety, which we're here for today. The Act provides the permit authority to establish this waiver process to address requests to install these new utility poles or new wireless support structures within the designated underground utility area. On April 28, 2017, Fishers was one of a very small handful of communities who did pass this waiver procedure to allow us to have this voice to be able to consider these locations that we're here for today.
So how the process will work from this point forward, thank you, Chris, is staff, Tammy, who does yeoman's work, will come up and she will describe the interactions that have happened to date and the conclusions that have been made through the conversations between both the 5G deployer and the neighborhood. Her comments are not an endorsement one way or another of these towers. She's just sharing what the interactions have been to date so the board understands what conversations have taken place to this point. So with that, we'll go ahead and start first with the Oaks of Krause Square, Resolution 082420E. This is actually a prior application that we tabled because of a concern over communication, I believe, between the HOA and the residents. So go ahead, Tammy.
Yes, Tammy Houston, Assistant Engineer. Oaks of Krause Square, we did bring this one before you.
Can you make sure that microphone's on, Tammy, so everybody can hear you?
I think it's on, yeah. Oaks of Krause Square was brought before you in August. At that time, The HOA, we were not able to get in contact with the HOA, and we talked to the property management group. Since then, we were able to speak with the HOA about these proposed locations. In Oaks of Crow Square, there are two that were proposed by Verizon. One was near the entrance of Morning Song Drive and Refreshing Garden Lane. In conversations with the HOA, they had asked if it was possible to move it to the corner of Calming Waters and Morning Song Drive to replace an existing street light.
And if you could just pause for 1 second, as much as I enjoy seeing Jeff's face early in the morning, I think for the folks here, if we could pull up the graphic of the, locations, I think that would be helpful, so people can see what you're referring to. Sorry, Jeff. Go ahead, Tammy. We'll figure it out as we go.
So the proposed location, or revised location, for address 10456 is to replace an existing street light on Calming Waters. The HOA and Verizon are accepting of that location. 14220 was originally proposed to be placed to replace an existing street light on Moonlight Path. It's in the middle of the long stretch of road. In conversations with the HOA, they had proposed to move it to the north to be the intersection of Juniper Breeze and Moonlight Path. There is an existing street light there today. However, the HOA had asked that the structure be moved about 20 feet away from that pole, so it is not directly in front of the window of that adjacent home. Verizon and the HOA are accepting of that new location. During the conversations with Verizon, the conversation was kind of directed towards the amount of coverage that was in this area, and with being able to move the other two locations, the HOA had actually suggested to possibly provide a third location in order to maintain the coverage that Verizon is asking for, and that is the location that you see on Juniper Breeze and Refreshing Garden Lane near the playground area. This new location up here. That again is going to be replacing an existing street light. The HOA had preferred a location to the east of that. However, for Verizon to get coverage down Refreshing Garden Lane, they were not able to move it to that location. So that this is the HOA's second choice, but Verizon is okay with this. So the two locations, 14220 and 10456, are the only two permits that are up for approval today.
So 220 and 456 are the permits that are up today, and the new location is more of the master plan if we need to put one in at some point?
Yes, that'll come at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone from this neighborhood that would like to speak on these specific sites? Seeing none, I guess I would open it up for Jason and Jeff. Any comments or questions?
No comments.
Here is, two original proposed sites. We tabled it, staff and Verizon came through with two others with the HOA, and that should created a third to accommodate.
Yeah, I mean, these are vastly better locations in the neighborhood, from my opinion, compared to where they were being considered, particularly 14220. Being able to move that to the corner seems like a significant improvement. If there are no other questions or comments, is there a motion?
Motion.
Is there a second? Motion by Jeff, second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Can we expand that for the wizard behind the curtain back there? Can we get that image expanded? Thank you. Next, let's move on to Heritage Meadows.
Might be as big as I can get it, but I'll zoom in too.
Thank you.
Okay, Heritage Meadows, we met with the HOA on, the end of August, to talk about 4 locations. There are 4 locations proposed in Heritage Meadows, however, only 3 of them are up for, approval today. 1, the permit has not been submitted yet. In general, the conversation was had, about the general locations of the structures. The HOA did request that there was a structure on Morgan Drive, which is 8564. Here at this location, they had asked if it would be able to be moved farther to the east to be able to kind of help light the trail in this area. Based on the coverage that Verizon is needing, they were not able to move it out there because it would lose coverage in this area. These will be black in color. There was conversations about whether or not the light style would be changed. They decided to keep the proposed double acorn lights. But the HOA and Verizon are both accepting of all 4 of these locations.
Which one, Tammy, is the master plan one, not, is it 11025 that's not being put in?
No, it's the 8564.
8564 is not being put in.
That one is not permitted at this time.
At this time, is there anyone from Heritage Meadows that would like to speak on these specific locations? Okay, seeing that there are no others, I'd entertain any questions from, the board at this point.
So Tammy, on 8449, is there under consideration by that roundabout? I'm assuming that's to the north?
The north is actually
Oh, to the
here over
left?
this way, so.
Okay, so to the
Towards
east,
the roundabout?
southeast?
No, the intent of 8449 is to service this area also, and if you move it to the roundabout, they would not be able to get down that street.
Well, I meant even to the, west of it, I guess. Looks like a pretty open area there.
You mean beyond the home there?
In this
Yeah,
area,
Right here.
Yeah.
there was not a
Yeah.
conversation about moving it closer to the roundabout.
Is that something we can consider? So it's not sitting in front of that home there on that little cul-de-sac, that little circle?
I would have to go back to Verizon to see what the,
I think it's worth the conversation, to Jason's point, that's right in front of what appears to be 2 homes' front doors, and I appreciate the fact that they're willing to have it there, but to Jason's point, and I don't have a scale here, but moving it what appears to be maybe 75 feet would put it out of the range of anyone's line of sight as a homeowner. So I agree with you, Jason, on tabling that one and asking them. I appreciate that the neighborhood's already agreed to it, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't hurt to have the conversation. Jeff, any questions or concerns from your perspective?
No, I concur with those.
All right, so, I guess at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve permit 8564 and 8450 and tabling 8449. Is that correct, Tammy?
Yes.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by Jeff. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, we'll move on to the Pines.
At the Pines, we met with the HOA at the end of August. There are 2 locations being proposed. Only one is up for permit today. The location at 9711 is, we had quite a bit of discussion on that location. Originally, the HOA had proposed to bring, there's an existing box of mailboxes, the collaboration of mailboxes in this area that has an existing light next to it. The HOA had proposed to move 9711 to this location, so it would be similar to 9849. That is also near a collection of mailboxes. It would be replacing a light. Verizon stated that if they were to move it there, they would not be able to get the coverage down River Oak Lane that they are needing. the Pines had proposed to add a third location. Verizon was not, agreeable to that for this subdivision. There was a lot of conversation on aesthetics of the pole. The HOA would have liked to have the pole match their existing poles a little closer than they do.
Can you explain that to me? So that Verizon's not willing to match the aesthetics of the pole?
Well, they were, but the aesthetics of the proposed pole more or less match our existing streetlights. The HOA had asked for them to match theirs. Verizon does have a pole that is very similar to theirs, but the HOA did not like the aesthetics of that one either. So they could not match it exactly. So the HOA was okay with using the existing proposed streetlight style that we have. The HOA then proposed, since it was not able to be moved to the mailboxes, that there is not any lights in this area around the bend here, so they have proposed to move it here. This is actually the very original location that Verizon had proposed prior to the city reviewing any of these locations. So the city had actually requested them to move it to, but Verizon and the HOA are agreeable to this location right here.
So the white dot they're agreeable to.
Yes.
So it's orange to yellow, yellow to white. Is that, am I accurate
Where
in that?
the white, there's,
I'm looking at that. I see the yellow dot, so I'm clear
yeah,
on that.
the
I don't know
yellow
where-
is
I don't- There's white dots on this exhibit, so, we'll just negate those. Okay, thank you, Tammy. Are there any questions from neighborhoods or comments from people from the Pines? Seeing none, is there any questions or conversations from Jeff or Jason?
So Tammy, I'm just trying to understand the aesthetics of the pole itself. Is it a color issue or an actual texture as far as the way it looks?
their concern was, it was more of the texture because we have the fluted pole.
Okay,
But Verizon does have a smooth pole.
okay, okay.
But they, the HOA did not like the aesthetics of that either.
Gotcha, okay. But they're satisfied with the green
They're-
color, it matches their current.
Since the location will be moved farther away from the main drive, they are okay with the proposed, aesthetic of the fluted pole.
Okay.
Any additional questions? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Jeff, is there a second? Second by Jason, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is, Winter Cove.
Winter Cove has two proposed locations to, both be, approved today. We did not actually have a, virtual meeting with the HOA. We were able to have conversations through email. The one in question that, was being discussed was 7526, which is at the intersection of Easy Street and Moore End Circle. It is directly at that intersection. This area here, this is a wooded lot. The HOA had suggested in order to, the property owner there wanted it not on that corner. They had asked to move it down here into this wooded area here before you get into Northfield Estates. Because the intention of this, location is to provide service to Easy Street and this cul-de-sac, by moving it to this area here, they would not be able to get Verizon would not be able to get the service on Easy Street. Also with the wooded area here, they would be very limited on the direction of the service, so it would be very confined to only a few homes. So, Verizon was not able to move this location per the request of the HOA. The other one at 11055, the HOA was, okay with.
Is there anyone here from, Winter Cove that would like to speak about these specific locations? Seeing that there's no one, is there any questions or comments from Jeff or Jason?
So just a point of clarity, Tammy, you mentioned the homeowner wanted to move, but then you mentioned the HOA. So is it the same, or was it individuals, or did they both come independently?
Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Jeff, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jason, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We'll now move on to Hamilton Hills.
In Hamilton Hills, we met with, two residents, or a property owner and a resident, at the end of August. The location, there are two, locations that are up for approval today. 9721, that is on the north side of Hamilton Hills Lane. It's on the golf course property, or in the right-of-way in front of the golf course. The concern with the golf course was make sure that it did not get into any of the mounding or landscaping area in that location, and Verizon was able to verify that it was going to stay in the right-of-way and not impact any of the landscaping or mounding in that area. The location here at 9986, the property owner at this location owns two adjacent lots, and with the placement of the proposed, Verizon's initial proposed location, it was going to be impactful to the empty lot for if and when the property owner sells it off to another homeowner. They would not be able to really place a driveway, and it would kind of impact the location where the driveway could be. So Verizon was able to move the structure to 60 feet to the south to be more on a property line, so that it would not impact the ability for that lot to be developed in the future. And the property owner is in agreement with that.
Is there anyone here from Hamilton Hills that would like to speak on specific locations? Seeing that there is no one, is there any questions or comments from Jeff or Jason?
Just another point of clarity, is it on the golf course right-of-way or the neighborhood?
For this
I couldn't tell with that.
For this 9986,
Yes, please.
it's on the homeowner's side.
So is there a right-of-way on the other side of the street there, along the golf course, just to eliminate any issues with the driveway?
There would, with moving it 60 feet to the south, everybody was okay with it's right on a property line, so there would not be any issue with the, driveway at that point.
Yeah, but my question was, is there a right-of-way on the golf course side?
There is right-of-way on the golf course side.
So would that impact if we had it moved over there versus in the neighborhood? I'm just trying to understand why, not just eliminate that whole concern. And would it impact a mound or landscaping as indicated on the other one?
I did not look closely at the other side to see if there's any impacts.
This is for 9986.
86, yeah,
So not only moving it to the revised location, but moving it across the street
correct. So it's completely
out of the
out of
neighborhood.
the neighborhood in a communal golf course area right away. Won't impact any potential driveways in the future or home placements or any of that.
Seems like a reasonable question to go back to Verizon with, Tammy. If it's the consent of the, do you have a comment on that? You're agreeable with that, so if we move it to that side? Okay, well, I think we just amend this and show that as a revised. So, Chris, for the purposes of approval, should we amend, or, because we don't have a specific location, I assume we gotta bring that one back just for formality's sake?
We will, if you make a motion to approve stating the relocation of that location, we'll bring it back on a map just on the consent agenda to approve it.
Okay.
Conditional to landscaping mounds or whatever other
Yeah.
concerns the golf course had.
Exactly.
Does that make sense?
So that could be moved left or right.
So, is there a motion to approve the, trying to get the numbers here.
9721.
721 as is, and a conditional approval of 9986 if it were to move across the street, be located on the golf course. Is that a fair enough motion, Chris?
Yes.
Okay. So is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Jason, second by Jeff. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, moving on to Audubon Trace.
Audubon Trace, we, met with the HOA at the beginning of October. There's one location in Audubon Trace up for approval today. It is at the intersection of Merlin Court and Sanderling Trace. It's on the north side, on the property line. There's actually, I believe there's a small common area that runs, back behind the properties. So it would be in the right-of-way in front of those common areas. The HOA is okay with the location. They did ask that this structure be not our Fisher's green, but to match their green. So the HOA is going to provide Verizon with that green color so that they can match it whenever they install it. Also, this would be replacing a existing street light that has a street sign on it, and Verizon is able to attach the street sign to the 5G structure also.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy. Is there anyone here from Audubon Trace that wants to speak on this specific location? Seeing that there is no one, is there a comment or question from the board? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
Motion.
Motion by Jeff, is there a second? Second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Move on to Heather Point.
Heather Point, we were also able to meet with them at the beginning of October. There are 2 locations in here that are up for approval today. Again, both of these, the HOA has requested that the green match the green that they have existing in their neighborhood. So they will be providing that color to Verizon. The location at 11365 will be on the property line between some homes. Because there is not an existing street light at that location, the HOA has requested that no light be installed on that one. But there would be a light installed at at 12324 on that proposed location. So the HOA is accepting of both locations, and then the light being removed on the 11365 location.
Thank you, Tammy. Is there anyone here from Heather Point that would like to speak on these specific locations? Okay. Seeing none, is there a question or comment from Jason or Jeff? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Motion by Jeff, is there a second? Second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. On the next item, we have Sandstone. Just to be clear, so we have 3 original spots, and then when you started moving things around, there's 2 additional permits. Is that correct, Tammy, on this?
No, there were 5 locations, and 2 of them were revised.
Okay, I'm with you. All right, go ahead.
Okay. So this is actually 4 separate neighborhoods that have the same HOA: Sandstone Ridge, Village Crossing, and Knoll. We met with them in the middle of September to discuss these 5 locations. The HOA had originally proposed several locations to be moved outside of the neighborhoods, to be moved onto Brook School Road or onto 116th Street. They actually had requested to have the location at 12751 removed completely. Because the intent of these structures is to service the neighborhoods, Verizon was not able to move the locations outside the neighborhood onto Brook School or 116th Street, and they would also not be able to remove 12751 completely from the deployment. So the location at 12714, it was originally proposed at the intersection of Mojave Drive and Heatherstone Drive. The HOA had requested the possibility of that moving to the north, away from the intersection, to be more on the curve of Heatherstone, in a darker area of the neighborhood. It's not a common area. It is, it's still in front of properties, but it's more of an open area. And Verizon is okay with putting that one at that location. The one at 12751, rather than eliminating that one completely on that court, through discussions with the HOA and Verizon, there was a couple of locations that were suggested. This one here that is shown, there's the next screen down on the second page. This location was one of the options, and another option was at one of the intersections of either Buffstone or Pavestone courts. The intent of this one is to be able to service both of these courts. The HOA preferred the property line between these two. It is in the back of the homes. Again, it's on the property line. The HOA has requested that none of these in the subdivision have lights on them. So there will not be any lights on any of the 5 that are proposed. The HOA and Verizon are accepting of all of these new locations.
Well, those two on surface, those two moves are significant improvements from where the original location was considered in terms of impact to homeowners. With that, is there anyone from Sandstone that would like to speak regarding these specific locations? Looks like we have a gentleman here. So if you could just come up and state your name and your address, we'd appreciate it. And share your comments.
Good morning, Mayor. Jeremy Baber, 11473 Hearthstone Drive, Fishers, Indiana. My comments today will serve to supplement my May 8th letter to you, Mayor, and my September 4th letter to both the City Council and you. I opposed the Verizon wireless application to install a new utility pole or wireless support structure at 11463 Hearthstone Drive, identified as R1015201, and I encourage the board to reject the application for the reasons I stated in my previous letters and the reasons today. I disagree with the city's ability to control the installation of these towers. I think the city from the very beginning has kind of flag and said they're coming. You can't really stop them. I am encouraged that the city has taken a closer look than they have been in the past at the installation sites. But Indiana Code 8-1-32.315 authorizes you, the permit authority, to prohibit placement of new utilities and wireless support structures in the right-of-way within the area designated strictly for underground and buried utilities. The 4 requirements are met. And the city has met those 4 requirements. Indiana Code also doesn't completely prohibit the installation of these facilities in neighborhoods. It certainly does not prohibit you from placing reasonable restrictions on their placement. And the city, in their amended resolution, placed some specific requirements that are reasonable, and you intentionally did that because it wasn't in the original resolution. And there you said that Verizon, to the greatest extent possible, should ensure that these are located at or near intersections, right away adjacent to common areas, entrances of neighborhoods, or utilized to replace existing light facilities within the neighborhood. Of the 5 installations in the Sandstone neighborhood, all but one of them are located at or near an intersection. In fact, one was moved from a court closer to an intersection. The one that is directly in front of my house in right-of-way directly in front of my house is nowhere near one of these city-specified locations. I understand that the Sandstone Homeowners Association requested that this location be relocated to an entrance in the neighborhood. Verizon said no, and the city has apparently agreed to Verizon's wishes. Verizon has indicated that they don't agree with the relocation because the coverage objective for this location is to service Hearthstone Drive and Little Rock Court. But I haven't seen any documentation or evidence showing that Verizon has gone to any extent, let alone the greatest extent possible, to make sure that this pole is located as a city preferred location. I'd request the board to, and I quote, be especially mindful of the community input when considering a waiver of any residentially zoned area of the city, as it indicated it would do so in its resolution. I was disappointed when there seemed to be a setback when the city had an intent to reduce the public feedback at board meetings in this area and restricted individuals that could participate in the placement of these facilities to just the homeowners association. I did not get to participate in any of the conversations with Verizon about the placement of the location in front of my home. Verizon is required to submit a construction plan as defined by the waiver application resolution. The construction plan was to identify all easements and existing structures within 1,000 feet of the proposed installation. I've looked at the construction plan that's been submitted online for the installation in front of my house, and if I had to guess, one, it doesn't cover 1,000 feet from that location, and two, there are probably 80 existing utility structures within 1,000 feet not listed on that construction plan. For example, in my front yard, less than 15 feet from this proposed location, are 3 above-ground Teleco pedestals, cable pedestals, electric box. So if this waiver is approved, not only do I have those, which I bargained for when I purchased the property, but I also now have a either a 39-foot or a 43-foot 1 7/8-inch pole directly in front of my house. It's viewable from every window. I haven't seen any comments regarding the fall zone for these poles. The common sense would tell you that either one of these 2 poles, 36 feet from my home, would hit my home if they were to fall. I'm glad to see that while I oppose the installation of this structure directly in front of my house, I'm glad to see that the lights have been removed, because that would have been an expense as well. The inevitable reduction in the value of my property alone is justification enough for the city to want to protect my rights as a citizen of Fishers and a property owner in this application. Imagine 15 years ago, you buy a house in Fishers in a planned unit development with sidewalk-lined streets and no obstruction of view because of the underground utility. You get equity into this home, you work on it to keep it nice and upkeep, and then along comes a utility pole that robs you of your use and enjoyment of that home and the value of. Members of the board, I would again encourage you to utilize the authority given by the state law and home rule and deny the waiver application of 11463 Hearthstone Drive and require the buyer and Verizon to the greatest extent possible to adhere to the non-discriminatory process outlined in your resolution. Place it at
Thank you, sir. A couple of points of clarification, just so I could. Staff in no way has endorsed or said that these should be approved. I think all Tammy is sharing with all of you is that Verizon and HOA came to some sort of agreement on locations. That being said, this board reserves the right to deny any of these applications. Our hope and our goal is through communication between Verizon and the HOAs that they can identify several solutions, which I think you saw today. There were several neighborhoods where they've come to consensus or agreement, which we appreciate and certainly look for. If there are scenarios where that doesn't occur, ultimately it's this board's responsibility to decide whether or not the placement of these towers are egregious or in some way cause undue harm to the residents, and that's what our considerations are up here. And to the gentleman's point, I actually am not supportive of this particular location. The other four seem like very reasonable locations. People work together to find spots to put it. And this could very well be detrimental to the coverage of this neighborhood area. So I do appreciate where Verizon may just be, frankly, just stuck with where it needs to go. But this does seem like it's literally right in front of four homes. And that just seems to me, unfortunately, at this point, I don't know that I could be supportive of that specific location. And that's just my comments. Jeff or Jason, do you have any considerations, questions, comments?
It certainly seems like there's an alternate location on the curve that, may not suit Verizon well, but would be better suited from a placement location. Gentleman raised some questions with respect to identification of items within the easement that I certainly, would appreciate someone providing some feedback on whether or not we have an issue with an application or not.
Can you paraphrase that? I didn't catch that. Can you speak up a little bit, Jason? We weren't able to hear that. Or Jeff, we weren't able to hear that.
Sure, sorry. The general, so yes, the placement, moving that off of my direction, but towards the curve, which would be to the north, certainly seems like a better location where we could find some greens, a little bit more green space, not directly in front of so many homes. And then also he raised some questions, the gentleman raised questions with respect to utility identifications within the easement on the application. And I certainly would appreciate some insight into that, whether we have some application problems.
So the question about other utilities and co-location, Tammy, was that consideration?
There are no utilities that they can co-locate on.
There were no utilities that they can co-locate on?
It wasn't a co-location question. It was that they had to be identified on the application.
Oh, they have to be identified on the application.
Within 1,000 feet.
Utilities. I would assume the only other utilities that need to be identified on the application are those that are viable candidates for co-location. Is that?
The intent, yeah.
That's the intent of the law.
Thank you.
Jason, any questions?
Yeah, thank you for the commentary. Tolling agreement, I'm not in favor of this location as well. It needs to be tabled or denied, in my opinion.
And so, in fairness to Verizon, obviously if there's alternative solutions somewhere and you want to continue to look to find another location, I'm happy to table it, but under the consideration that, bringing it back as it stands we would only repeat the same conversation and have it denied. So we can table it and have Verizon go explore if there are other options. That would be, I guess, my direction on my action here today. So,
Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
I appreciate Verizon's so far, willingness and looking into alternative solutions for these concerns, but this one is outside of that area.
So with that, I'll make a motion to approve the, I guess, to be very specific, let me go through the numbers here. And Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong on these, okay? I'll make a motion to approve 12-7-14, 12-7-51, 11-463.
No, that's the one you want to table.
11-469, I'm sorry. 11-148, and table 11-463. Is that correct, Tammy? Is there a motion or a second?
If I could, just point of clarity. Mayor, you're talking about 12-751 revised and 12-714 revised.
Correct,
Okay.
those two is revised.
Yep, okay.
Is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jeff. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to Connor Knoll.
In Connor Knoll, we met with the HOA in the middle of September. There are 5 locations that are being proposed in the neighborhood. Only 3 are up for consideration today. a lot of conversation was had about, again, moving all of these structures outside of the neighborhood, either putting them along 131st Street or putting them into the, Duke easements that run between the neighborhoods of Conner Knoll and Linwood Hills and along the east side, between Conner Knoll and Cottingham Estates. Verizon was not able to move them on 131st Street because it would not service the neighborhood. The issue with moving to the Duke easements outside of the neighborhood is they are specifically Duke-owned easements, and with the extensive amount of trees in that area and fences, they were not able to make sure that they could maintain access at all times in order to get back there. And they would also, with the tree line, be limited on the coverage. Conversation was also had about possibly placing one of the structures on the backside of New Britain Elementary School onto their property line. There was thought that there might have been a utility easement in the back of the school property. The information that I was able to find did not show an easement along that property line. It only showed an easement along the backside of Conner Knoll property owners. So there were 3 locations that we discussed as far as actual relocation. The location 13289, that was originally proposed on the southeast corner of that intersection of Knoll Crossing and I believe that's Conner. Because of the closeness to that existing driveway in this area here, the HOA proposed to put it on any of the other 3 corners. They had buy-off from the residents in that area, and it was decided that just to the north of that intersection on the northeast corner, Verizon was able to place that new proposed location. There was also conversation with 13188. It is on the west corner of Buffett Parkway and Knollwood Place. It was brought to concern from the HOA that there is an existing gas line that could possibly prohibit that location to be placed there. So conversation was had to either move it across the street, across Knollwood Place to the other corner, or to move it to the north side of Buffett Parkway. There's concern about if we put it on the this corner here, that there could possibly be some impact to the sight line along Buffett Parkway. So we didn't want to impact that. So Verizon and the HOA were accepting of moving it to the north side as long as there's no conflict with any of the gas line in that area. That would be on a property line at that intersection. And you can see that location on the second page, also a little zoomed in a little more. 8569 Knoll Crossing. The original proposed location was kind of in the middle of Knoll Crossing. It was on a property line, but it was in the middle of this stretch. Conversations were had that to move to more of the property line around the bend here in order to get closer to that bend. And the HOA and Verizon were accepting of that location. Verizon is still working on the conversation we've had also about possibility of the HOA to add banner arms or planter arms in order to make these look more aesthetically pleasing by being able to add hanging plants on them. Verizon is currently looking into the legalities of being able to place those on the structures themselves. They will get back with the HOA once they get a confirmation on whether or not they were able to do that, both structurally and legally.
Great. Thank you, Tammy. Is there anyone from Connor Knoll that would like to speak on these specific locations? Okay. Please state your name and address.
Louis Lujak, 8570 Knoll Crossing, Fishers, Indiana. First, I'd like to thank you and the members of this board for providing this process where we're afforded an opportunity to voice our concerns on the matter. And I'd also like to thank Shauna Gradle, our president, who was unable to be here today due to medical issues. First, I'd like to address, as Tammy had stated, that we had agreed to any of these locations. That is not the position of the Connor Knoll HOA. They do not find any of these proposed locations to be agreeable, and we stated as such during the September 11th meeting. Addressing the larger issue at hand, I've been studying the feedback and suggestions of the HOAs that they've been providing to Verizon in the respective meetings, and there seems to be a pattern of Verizon resisting suggestions to move these poles. These suggested locations are often no more than a couple of 100 feet from the original proposed site. Verizon cites concerns with their ability to provide their desired coverage, either due to creating excessive overlap or gap. Verizon has also resisted several suggestions to move a pole based on tree coverage, citing that the trees will block their signals. I ask, what good is a cellular network where the infrastructure requires such closely grouped clusters of unsightly poles? What good is a cellular network where each transmitter requires an uninhibited line of sight to the end user? The fact is, Verizon's millimeter wave technology that these small cell facilities employ works much like a Bluetooth device, great at carrying large over a short distance. A Bluetooth speaker works great when you're streaming music from your phone to the speaker across the room, but get up with your phone and move to another room and it loses connection. If a few tree branches present a concern for these small cell facilities, how does Verizon plan on getting the signal inside people's homes? Solid structures of brick and wood. What happens when AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, or any other carrier decides the poles Verizon has placed aren't in optimal locations to meet their coverage requirements? Are we expected to have a 40-foot out of the ground at 100 feet, 100? Should we have a pole in every yard? There's a reason people don't power their homes with a windmill in every yard. While it would provide clean, renewable energy, it would be inefficient and unsightly, which is exactly what Verizon has proposed with this 5G network in our neighborhood, an inefficient and unsightly mess of structures. And what benefit will this network serve? Will we be able to download a movie a little bit faster? The one guy in Indiana with a driverless car won't have to touch his steering wheel? In our meeting with Verizon on September 11th, they did not offer one tangible benefit that these small cell networks will provide to our neighborhood. I believe Tammy Houston gave the only justification for the placement of these poles in our yards is that it's legal. We suggested several locations to Verizon that would minimize their visual impact to our neighborhood while keeping their coverage intact, but our suggestions fell on deaf ears. Even basic issues such as removal of lights and or the addition of a flower box hanger were not definitively addressed. We don't believe any serious effort was undertaken to accommodate our concerns, and we have been unable to reach a mutual agreement with Verizon on placement locations. We have decided that these structures will not provide any benefit that outweighs the detriment it will have on Connor Knoll. On behalf of the Connor Knoll HOA and residents, I respectfully ask this board to deny Verizon's application for construction of these facilities in our neighborhood in keeping with the provisions set by Indiana state law, which allows for this permit authority to prohibit placement of small cell facilities in residential neighborhoods. You went to the trouble to give the residents a choice and a say in the matter, and you have the power given to you by the state of Indiana to deny these applications. Please place the interests of the citizens of Fishers above those of a corporation We live on these streets, Verizon does not, and our concerns should outweigh those of a telecommunications company.
Thank you, sir. And just for a point of clarity, are you on the HOA board, or are you an officer on the HOA
They
board?
put me on the 5G committee.
On the 5G committee, okay. I just want to make sure that I understand when we're getting mixed messages, where those messages are coming from. So thank you, sir, for that. Thank you for your comments. I saw some other hands raised. Please feel free to step forward and share your comments.
Good morning, Mayor.
Hello.
Good morning. For the record, Bob Gwindon, Guindon, 8775 Buffett Parkway, specifically site 13188, front yard of my home. Upon our HOA working with the city, we deemed that this location was moved across the street to my side of the street, the north side, because of utilities. Prompting and hearing this from people on the HOA in my neighborhood that have been there ever since I have, since 1992. We did a underground marking, utilities marking, and have a gas line running right through my front yard on the north side of the street, and both my neighbors to the north and to the south. So it does not seem to make sense that a pole that's 30 feet high with a 48 to 60-inch deep footing would be interacting with a gas line that's at 36 inches below grade. So obviously, that's a concern. That's my
Thank you, sir.
comment for now.
And that was 13188, correct, sir? Correct. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Keith Zettel. I'm at 13190 Norwood Place. I'm also part of that 5G committee of the Homeowners Association and was on the call on September 11th. So the original placement of 13188 was actually in the public right-of-way in my yard, or at that corner of my yard. And there is a gas line that runs down through that island, and for that reason is why Verizon recommended moving it across the street. We had conversations about to Bob's property line, and as Bob mentioned, a few of us homeowners called 811. We had them come out and mark it, and the main gas line that feeds that area of Connor Knoll actually runs on the north side of Buffett Parkway, and we have pictures that we can show you of those flags. And then everything that feeds Knollwood Place runs through that, which is houses. We have not had conversations about where we would recommend necessarily to move it, but the island on the south side of Buffett Parkway, that's where the main water line is run. I'm not sure how deep that is, but the question might be, could that be moved eastward? If you were able to zoom in far enough on this, you would see that right below the number 3 is one of the driveways, and right across from that, to the east a little bit further, right before the B in Buffett, there is a fire hydrant. So we're not saying move it to the fire hydrant, but in that vicinity, the only thing that's probably in that area is a water line. Again, not sure how deep it is. But if it to that area, it's probably the least impactful. The other potential, although I wouldn't really recommend it, very close to where it was originally placed in the island on Buffett Parkway. That would be right in front of Bob's house where he'd stare out at it. I would stare out at it from my house. That is also where the bus always stops for the last 2.5 decades. So I don't know as though I'd really want a pole sitting right there where the buses are always stopping. But so I just wanted to let you know that we did have the utilities come out and mark, and there are major gas lines running in both the spots that were recommended for there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak on, Connor Knoll? Okay.
One other real quick, sorry.
Yes?
In looking at the documentation last night, our meeting that we had was on September 11th. The dated documents where Verizon states that any of these to the utilities or any of the other areas was actually signed and dated on September 9th, which was 2 days before we had our conversation.
Okay.
I thought that was a little strange.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sir?
How are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. My name is Mike Ruth, 8569 Conner Knoll Parkway. So as you can tell, that's right in front of our houses, 8586, beg your pardon. I've only been here for 25 years, don't even know my own address. So first of all, the question is, first of all, is this is a community that has no light poles, right? So, first of all, whatever we decide with this neighborhood, hopefully we don't have them, but if we do have these poles, can they please have no lights on them?
It's at your discretion. So it's at the HOA board's discretion as to whether they have light poles on them or not. You're not mandated to have light poles on the poles.
Yeah, so if we do have the poles, they cannot have lights, right?
It's your
And that
neighborhood
is the
decision.
option.
Yep.
Okay, which is great. As for locations, the gentleman in, is it Sandstone, presentation
Yeah.
before, his arguments are the same as our arguments. These are right in front of our houses. This is a neighborhood that's designed that nobody's gonna be happy in this neighborhood. There's just no way around it. So if indeed, the gentleman's proposal before, Mayor, you had mentioned that you don't like where that pole was for the prior gentleman.
Correct.
For those are the same reasons we're having right here as well. So my question would be is that if you go to Verizon, say, as a mayor, I don't like that pole in that particular location for that gentleman, those are the same reasons that we were making the same proposal here. So we would be happy to say, Verizon, no.
Right.
So those are my comments there. Also, the last comment I had made is that the previous location of 8569, 6 months ago, was 4 houses to the south. Yeah. And then there was a request to move it. Could it be moved to the north to where it is right now? And that was okay. Well, that was okay from our standpoint, the previous location, and now where it is in this location isn't okay. That's not good for any of the neighbors or whatnot. So it's just a comment I wanted to make there is that as we go, we're talking about neighbors. We have to live with these folks, and if we start moving these poles around, that's going to impact our neighborhoods as well as potential relationships.
Certain neighbors against neighbors, yeah.
Well, and the last comment I wanted to make is it was mentioned as well, is that has anybody done an analysis on the property values? I mean, we've lived here. You put a pole in the front yard, it will affect who wants to buy your house. I'm sorry, it will. If it was in front of your yard, you would think the same thing. So those are my comments. I appreciate
that,
it.
sir.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Somehow, and it was not by design, it appears the last 3 neighborhoods are the ones that all of you are here for, so I apologize. I did not know that, keep you waiting this long, so I apologize for that.
Hi, Mayor.
Go
My
ahead,
name's
sir.
Ray Downing. I'm at 8578 Knoll Crossing, just a couple doors down from Mike.
Yep.
And I have a similar issue with it. I don't know how many people in our neighborhood even use Verizon. I've got AT&T, I've got 5G, and I don't have to have a pole in front of my house. So that's my concern, is the property values. This is gonna be right outside my driveway, basically, I'm gonna be looking at it every single day.
And that's for
looking
the
around my house.
8569?
Yeah, the
placement?
8569.
Okay.
The new proposed thing is like basically right outside my driveway.
So you're right across the street?
Yeah, I'm not by the pond side, I'm on the other side.
Gotcha.
So
All right.
I get to look at it every single day. So I agree with Mike. I don't see the need for it. The technology seems to be inefficient. So if I can get 5G with AT&T, why can't Verizon do the same thing? That's all I have to ask.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anybody else from Conner Knoll? thank you all for coming and sharing your comments today. I have a few comments, and I'll, Jason, Jeff, the one that stood out with me right away, right off the beginning, and I'm sure there was probably some rationale behind it, but the revised location for 13188, I'm not supportive of. It lands right in the middle of a bunch of homes. And I don't pretend to understand the utility complications that are around that area, and the gentleman spoke to some of their concerns about that, but it would seem there are some viable options around that intersection that would be less intrusive on homeowners. And I didn't understand why it couldn't have been moved across the street or on the corner. Is there a gas line issue there?
Where it was originally, proposed on this corner, as the gentleman said, there's a gas line there. So it was moving it to this corner, but by placing it in that corner, because of the way that this road was, there was concern about, sightline issues with, vehicles, to be able to see, cars coming this way.
And there was no place on that corner that you could identify that wouldn't have a sightline issue?
Well, I didn't go out there and actually, spot it, but the concerns were brought up with the HOA also. The HOA actually brought up the sightline issue, and I think that there could be a possibility.
I have.
With existing utilities, obviously, before any of them go in, they call Indiana 811, make sure that there are no
Sure, yeah, I mean, no one's gonna
utilities in the area.
hopefully puncture a gas line, but, although it seems to happen every 4 or 5 days in our community somewhere, I have a problem with this as an alternative solution. It doesn't seem like it's solving a lot of problems for the residents on 13188. I have a problem with that. That's just a comment on mine. Jason or Jeff, do you have any thoughts? Jeff, any comments?
I apologize, I wasn't able to hear Jason. Concern, seems to be a little bit of discourse and communication. Obviously, it's a little bit of a he said, she said with respect to communication between who was talked to and who wasn't, and communication, who agrees and who doesn't agree. So if I'm repeating things, I apologize. But I'd like to go back on those and revisit that and try to close that communication gap down.
So those that couldn't hear him because of communications issues, he was talking about communications issues. Ironic there, yeah. Look, I agree with Jason's comments. I will say, and we try to be consistent on this board, if there's a rational location for these to go that doesn't impede or infringe on residents or homeowners from a reasonable standpoint, we are likely and to some degree duty bound to approve them. But at the same time, if there are challenges that any average homeowner would say, hey, this seems like an undue burden put on me for the greater good of everyone, then, we'll take serious consideration of that. And there may be a point where we just say, no, we're not going to do it. And then there is consequences to that in terms of coverage. I think Verizon would be the first one to tell you, you're not likely to get the coverage. You might say, I don't give a damn. That's fine. Appreciate that. But we have to weigh all those considerations. So, Jason, you have a motion to table this neighborhood as a whole, primarily for the purpose of if we start moving one of these around, it might move another and another.
Right.
And then also the direction is to solve the communication gap between the HOA board and the subcommittee, it sounds like. And then also, the hanging baskets question, whether we can get that resolved one way or another. Is that fair, Jason?
Yes.
Sir, you wanted to say something? Please, yep. State your name and I guess in this case, who you work for.
Leonard Strickland, Indianapolis, Indiana, and I'm here today representing Verizon. Just one of the things I really wanted to point out is, as has been shown time and time again, is that where Verizon can make changes, I think we've been more than agreeable to do those. At the same time, I also really need to point out that we have been following the rules, the laws, et cetera, that have been set up with the state, as well as with the city. We don't want to end up creating a bad precedent if we deny one group and we have to deny all groups. And that's just really the way it's going to pan out, is what I feel. So we just really want to make sure that, I guess, a legal discussion might have to happen, excuse me, is that we're all aware of that. In particular, when we go for our sightings with utilities, we do also locate with Indiana 811, and we also hand dig a lot of locations that are near utilities, and so this is something we do all the time. In particular to the gas lines right around 1388 or 13188, I'm totally fine with us moving that to further discuss that.
Yeah.
But we do typically, mark all of our utilities and make sure that we're clear of those. And we do operate near utilities all the time, so we hand dig what needs to be applicable, because we obviously don't want to cause an accident.
I appreciate that.
But I also want to point out that I do take into account consideration, that's why I have been attending these.
Yeah.
The concerns of the property owners and the residents, and that's why we do make a lot of changes in even our site design.
Yeah.
The light was a value add for the city. We don't have to have them.
Sure.
The colors of the poles were, again, to be consistent with the city's existing lighting structure. We have various colors that we can definitely match, and I think it was brought up in one of the other neighborhoods as well, too, that we'll be more than happy to match their paint color.
Sure.
As far as the hanging planters and banner arms, that's for structural concerns, is we do want to make sure that the pole maintains its structural abilities.
Yeah.
And initially, it was brought up about banner arms, and banner arms fail, basically. So you have to take into account wind loading and stuff like that. And then also, again, it comes down to our concern and liabilities for the homeowners and the residents as well, too, is we want to make sure that if they do go, because the banner arms and hanging of banners would be on the HOA, we don't want to have any issues where somebody's hanging a banner and falls. And that could be a concern for us. And it's the same thing with hanging a planter. A planter, depending on how often it's watered, the weight could vary from 5 pounds to 20 pounds, how much you water it and when.
Yeah.
And plus, a planter will sway in the breeze, and the last thing we want is to have planters bashing up against utility poles too. So those are the considerations that we're taking into account.
Thank you. Well, I think the question is just, yes or no on the baskets, so that these people have clarity in that regard. So if you can provide that.
Yes.
And then as for your concern about legal precedent or the chance that you and I might find ourselves in court about these issues, I think we've demonstrated time and time again a reasonable level of consideration. In fact, we've approved the vast majority of these, mainly because we've created a process where you and the HOA sit down and have an actual conversation about a different solution. And you've been great in that regard. But there will be times we still decide that it's not in the best interest of our residents, and hopefully you can appreciate that and your company can appreciate that. And if not, then we'll deal with that in a different venue. So
No, we definitely
appreciate your time.
appreciate everything that's happened for the past several years.
Yeah.
So we
Great.
want to continue that relationship.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. I think we're through Connor Knoll at this point. Thank you, gentlemen. And we will communicate back as we move. So Tammy will be back in touch with all of you again, so that you're not surprised by the next conversation we have about this. So communication will continue on that front. Thank you,
Mayor,
guys.
I think there was a motion on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jason, so moved. Is there a second by Jeff?
Second.
Second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, moving on to Idlewood. I assume, Jason, you're going to recuse yourself from this conversation?
Yes, but I may add color.
Okay, very good. So he's no longer a board member at this point, for the purposes of this, neighborhood, just so, for complete transparency, Jason is a resident of Idlewood, so he's gonna abstain from the vote on this. Tammy, go ahead.
We met with the residents of Idlewood early September. There are two locations up for consideration today. One is being proposed at Idlewood Drive and Lock Raven Court. There's 11504, and also, along Lock Raven Boulevard at 11294. Both of these locations were requested by the HOA, to be relocated. The one here at 11504 was asked to be relocated in this entrance area, either along 116th Street or possibly at the end here of this, entrance median. Verizon stated that the intent of this location is to service down this area and in this court. So they were not in agreement with moving. This location here, 11294, is at there's a residence here, and then all of this here is tree-lined, and it's densely wooded in the back here. The request on this one was to move it initially down here to this intersection into Sandstone Crossing, I believe. It would still be in Idlewood. It would be at this corner here. This location, Verizon stated that they would lose coverage to this area here, and also with the service to this area, there's a structure here in Sandstone that was approved earlier today that the service would impact the ability for those two to service the areas here. Also, a request was asked to bring the location down in this area across from this empty lot here. Again, this is wooded here. With this location, with the amount of trees in this area and the curvature of the roadway, Verizon would not be able to get service to this area here. So Verizon stated that because the intent of this structure to service this and this area, this is the optimal place for that. Again, if this is a resident area, then this is a common area that's a tree preservation area. It would be in the right-of-way. Idlewood is not accepting of these locations at all. They would prefer that Verizon hold off on deploying any in their neighborhood at this time.
Okay. Is that it, Tammy? Yeah. All right. Are there residents from Idlewood that would like to speak? Go ahead, ma'am.
Donita Johnson, 11499 Idlewood Drive, and I'm here to represent the neighborhood of Idlewood. And could all the Idlewood members stand, homeowners?
Thanks for being here.
That might help a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. We all obviously have the two permits, and we did fact gather with our meeting with Tammy and with Verizon. And then we went to the neighborhood homeowners as members of the HOA and found out what they actually wanted. And so we actually are here today to present to you 56 names, homeowners out of 64 residence homes. We actually have 65 lots in Idlewood. We're a very small community, very close-knit. And we have one undeveloped lot, so there's technically 64 homes. Of the 64 homes, we actually have 56 signatures that are asking you today, as our plea, to use the may prohibit and ask you to prohibit the permits under Section Indiana Code 8-1-32.3 through 15, subsection C, that you have the permit authority to as a permitting authority to may prohibit these permits because we are strictly underground utilities, as your resolution, and because we are also residential land use. Reasons why we bought our homes in the first place. These are areas that we want to maintain strictly underground. The neighborhood is in agreement, these 56 signatures, that we want to remain strictly underground with no overhead utilities now and in the future. So if other companies come through with proposals as well, we do the same as that. And we are asking you to not table. We're asking you not to approve. We're asking you to deny today that we remain strictly underground for Idawood.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
I guess I have a legal question, Chris. In our consideration of these locations, do we have the legal ability to deny it based on residents' desires to not utilize the utility?
No, we don't. The underground restrictions are strictly preempted by state and federal law and the FCC order.
I just want to frame that because gentlemen from Verizon or other utilities that are here that understand the state and federal law, if we were to make a determination based on those things, then ourselves more than likely in a lawsuit against the federal government, of which we're not likely to win. So I appreciate where you're coming from and your desire not to have it, but whether we approve or deny these can't be based on what you just stated in terms of your just general desire not to see them be there.
Actually, no, your resolution on April 28th, 2017, you actually deemed Fishers to be strictly underground. Because of that, you've already made it so that we're already a residential. I can read to you Indiana code.
I'm familiar with the resolution.
Okay.
Ma'am, the purpose of the resolution, not to disrupt you here, but was to provide for this waiver process so that if we could set up those residentially zoned areas and deem them underground utilities, which we did, it provides the opportunity for you to be here today to have these conversations, which other communities aren't having.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative about your guys' desire, and I am hearing your desire. I'm just trying to make sure that when we're sitting up here considering this, it's framed in such a way that it isn't a denial or approval based on things that legally I have no right to make those decisions based on.
And as far as the Indiana code states here, and you have may prohibit based on that within an area that is designated strictly for underground or buried utilities. You did that on April 28, 2017.
Right.
Therefore, you do have the power to do so, and we're showing you with 56 names that is nearly 90% of our neighborhood who's actually saying, we bought our homes, we have over $500,000 homes in here, this is our investment, this is our livelihood, and we want to remain strictly underground.
I hear you 100%, and I think maybe we're just getting into a legal discussion that's maybe not relevant for the purposes of this point, but just to be clear, from this board's perspective, we will consider these permits based not on the desire by the neighborhood from a demand perspective, but rather just from what state and federal government allows me to make an approval or denial from. Is that fair, Chris?
So section 15 says that as long as we're strictly underground, that you have the authority to permit or to deny or prohibit. In section 26, if you weren't strictly underground, then that is where the leeway comes into play, that if it's residential land use, then you may not have the ability to say no. It's clearly stating here that you can say no, and that's what we're asking you with R56.
I think what I'm saying, ma'am, is we have said no. You've sat here and heard us say no to certain towers. I'm just sharing with you that the considerations that I have to clarify, that if I were to say no for the purposes that you've shared, that would be challengeable in court by Verizon. So it's not that I am not going to say no or won't consider saying no. It's that I have to consider a different set of rationale for why I would say no. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but what's the point of the resolution that you made on April 28th then?
Chris, do you want to?
Well, sure, the point of the resolution is to set up a forum so that Verizon or any other telecommunication provider can't come into your neighborhood without providing you notice and construct these small cell facilities like what's going on in several communities across our state right now. And although you pointed out in the state code that there is a residential waiver exemption, further down in the code, the residential waiver exemption has to be supported by some waiver process where the board cannot treat neighborhoods in a discriminatory manner. Part of that federal and state regulation, what the mayor was getting at, is the reasons that you provided for today are discriminatory in the sense that the federal law has strictly preempted us from considering those considerations. So what the mayor has been telling you, what the board's been telling you is that we're here to try to help provide alternative locations within the neighborhood, but to strictly say no based on the reasons that you've articulated has been strictly preempted by federal law and the FCC order.
From my understanding is, and I'm sorry if I'm grossly misunderstood, but the federal law, the Telecommunication Act of 1996 actually says that they may not prohibit under environmental effects. So it doesn't actually state anywhere about strictly underground utilities.
That's part of the rationale, ma'am.
So again, today, we're asking you, if this is what your constituents want, this is something that we do not want in our neighborhood. This is not the burden of the homeowners to figure out how this technology fits within our streets. That is the burden of Verizon to figure out how to make this technology either be one underground like all the other utilities. Case in point, fiber optics. MetroNet is in our neighborhood right now and comply with the strictly underground utilities. If they have other means,
Is the fact that they are directly in line of sight of people. Locations that could potentially be suitable for the neighborhood. Everything was denied because of the tree-lined nature of our neighborhood. There is virtually no place to move these within our neighborhood that aren't directly in line of sight of individuals' properties. Because it is such a small neighborhood, there's only so many spaces that these things can be located in. So therefore, just based on the sheer fact that there is no place to locate these that don't directly impact any given neighbor, we are further requesting that these be denied. Thank you. Thank you, Brian. Okay. Jason, is there any, oh, yes, go ahead, ma'am, sorry.
Good morning, Stacy Morris, 14494 Loch Raven Boulevard. Almost, I haven't actually moved in yet. I'm in a unique position in that we purchased the home, we closed a few weeks ago, and had no idea this was happening. I had no idea until the petition came to my door a couple days ago when I was checking on painters. So surprised to say the least. My home is actually on the corner of the entrance, right where one of the towers are proposed to go. By the pond. You know, we've searched for a long time for the perfect house, and we found it. We bought the location, we bought the tranquility, We bought the peace of mind. And that's really potentially being taken from me before I even move in. We've got these beautiful views out each window of the water and the pond, and with that tower there, it's unsightly. You have a right to peaceful enjoyment in your home, and with these towers, not only come the aesthetics of having them there, but come constant work crews. And I know this from firsthand, living near other towers, and not just during the day, but all times of the night. Crews constantly working on them. If there's a storm, or whatever happens, things happen. You call Verizon, they send somebody out to the towers. I don't need somebody climbing a tower over my window at all times of the night and day. I'm home alone at night I'm a single mom of a 10-year-old. I just don't think that that's a good location, and I agree with the gentleman before me that there's just no good place in the neighborhood. I know that when the board was presented with this by Verizon, that the board had said that they would consider aesthetics when deciding upon these permits. And I know that Verizon said that they would try to make sure that these were not near home. And I don't see that this is happening in this neighborhood with these locations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay. Jason, is there anything you want to share as a resident prior to Jeff and I's consideration of this? I thought you said you wanted to share some comments.
So, yes, I'm a resident of Idlewood. Idlewood Drive doesn't impact me directly. And you can see for the record, I did not sign the petition, so I'm going to stay neutral. But I think the testimony that's been discussed is pretty, very, forthcoming, very, affirmative to the request. And being impartial, I would ask that the board consider, these requests. And we also need to notice too, the steps took place initially, we're looking at relocation, completely denied. So now the neighborhood is asking for a complete denial. And there's been some argument up for interpretation to what that means. Some underground utility-only easements and things like that, but it just needs to be considered.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Jeff, anything from your perspective?
I appreciate the residents' concerns with respect to the location. Based on my understanding of what we've been presented and the agreements that, or I'm choosing the wrong word here. The structure that we have in place with respect to approving these permits or denying these permits, it's my understanding that the underground permit application or desire is not relevant in this mechanism. So as much as I appreciate their concerns with respect to the underground utilities, I'm not sure that those are prevalent for our conversation or purview. I think that the locations that Verizon has put forth in this particular case are not dissimilar from other locations that we've considered with respect to intersections and so forth. So, I'm not sure that I can object to the placement of these based on the consideration that we've had on other locations. That said, I'm open to further conversations with the HOA and Verizon if they're willing to come back to the table and have those conversations. But a flat out denial just based on aesthetics is something I'm going to struggle with.
So I want to be as consistent as possible as I evaluate these. And the way that I guess I look at this, for consistency's sake, I would not be in favor of the one in the interior of the neighborhood. It's directly in front of two homeowners. I've already denied other HOA or other locations today regarding an undue burden on the residents. So that one I would deny outright as we sit here today. Full well knowing that may have implications on people's services that they could get from the tower. The other one, I would have a hard time saying that, I wouldn't consider that one. Now, I think the placement of it is questionable as to whether we couldn't move it at the entrance in some direction, one way or another, to try to alleviate some of the direct burden on the homeowner on the corner. And that might be a conversation with Verizon. So I'm not willing to say no to that entrance, one, because consistently in all of our neighborhoods, we've considered that as a viable option. When you stick one in front of two people's homes, where every time they look out their living room window, they're looking at a tower, that's where I have a problem. And so maybe I'm becoming extraordinarily predictable about these things. But, so for me, Jeff, I hear what you're saying, and I think, I am not in favor of the one in the interior of the neighborhood. I'm willing to table the other one and see if we can't figure out a way to alleviate some of the concerns at the entrance. And, you know, whether that's moving it across the street, whether, you know, it's moving it away from people's line of sight windows wise, I mean, that.
To clarify on that location, it is on the corner with the pond here. It is not on one of the corners with the homes, just to clarify.
Okay. Are there? Yeah, so the permit shows the light on the corner of the house, not on the corner of the pond. So the tower is being placed on the corner by the home on the, what would be the east side of the road.
Yeah, I'll verify, but, it's on the, yeah.
Leonard, do you know where this location?
It's on the pond side.
It's on the pond side, so it's not on the homeowner side. Yeah. Yeah.
The permit is based on what was submitted by.
Well, maybe we can
Verizon
clean this
originally.
up, clear it up. First of all, where is the permit actually being asked to be put? Because that may alleviate some of the people's concerns. It certainly would clarify some things for me in regard to where it's located. So maybe when we come back, A, figure out where specifically this thing's going, and then B, if we can work with the individual residents that are directly affected by that tower, which, you know, that seems like a pretty reasonable location on that corner. I mean, it's not anywhere near anybody's front window or anything like that. It looks like you got a garage on one side and a side of a house on another with a pretty good amount of distance. But if we could just clear that up and talk to those two direct homeowners and see if there's a positioning that would be viable, I would entertain that. Jeff, do you have any concerns about that direction?
No.
So I will make a motion to deny, sorry, I don't have a number off the top of my head.
11294.
Yep, 11294, and table 11504 for a conversation and clarification with the direct homeowners and Verizon. Bring that back to the next agenda item.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Jason, yeah, one abstention. Yes, sir, go ahead. It had an undue burden on the individual residents that lived adjacent to it.
And we'll provide those comments to you, Leonard, directly in minutes that'll be posted after the meeting as well.
They were not for the express purpose of the fact that the neighborhood just doesn't want them, just to be clear. All right, moving on to our final item is River Highlands. Tammy, go ahead.
River Highlands, we met with them the end of August, there are two locations up for consideration today. One is at 7466 River Highlands Drive. That is at the intersection of River Highlands Drive and Walnut Ridge Place. A lot of discussion was had on the location of this before and after the call with the HOA. The request from the HOA was to move it to around this bend here. There is currently an existing street light here and an existing street light in this area. And the request was to move it to one of those locations. This area is heavily wooded, and the ability for Verizon to get coverage to the locations that they were needing, they would not be able to at one of these locations here. There's also concern there is a hydrant on this corner. We have spoken with both the fire department and Citizens Energy and about the separation distance on that hydrant. Citizens Energy actually owns that hydrant, and they've stated that there needs to be a 3-foot clear zone. Verizon will be outside of that 3-foot clear zone and not obstruct any of the ability to use that fire hydrant.
Okay.
The other location here is at 7421. This will be on the property line between these two homes. There's currently a Duke transformer, ground transformer at that location that it would be near. The question was brought up, suggestions about moving it to the back side of the homes. Verizon would not be able to do that on private property. It'd stay in the right-of-way. There's also about bringing it to this intersection here at Glen Vista. Verizon would then lose some coverage here on the south end if they moved it farther to the north. Again, they had asked, the HOA also asked to move it down here to the more of the bulb of the cul-de-sac. By moving it farther down that way, Verizon would lose coverage here to the north.
Is there anyone here from River Highlands that would like to speak? Thank you, and I apologize for the lengthy meeting.
Steve Sahakian from 7417 River Highlands Drive. And I have two concerns. First concern, I have defibrillator situation, and I shouldn't be around the high voltage of rail area. And that's really about 15 to 17 feet from my bedroom and my home office. My second concern is about the value of the house. I've been there since 1995, and then when I want to sell it, its value is not going to be there. And buyer always have excuse for bring the value down.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else from River Highlands would like to speak? Okay, Jason or Jeff, any questions or thoughts on this? Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't see you.
That's okay. I don't really have any fresh remarks or prepared remarks, but I do want to echo all of the concerns that we heard today.
Ma'am, could
over
you
the
provide
last
your
2 hours.
name? Could you provide your name for the record so we have
Yes.
it? Thank you.
My name is Christy Mins, and I live right next door to Steve at 7423 River Highlands. And so it is on our property line, or it'll be on that property line. And I guess my concern is just that, I just want to state that we've lived in Fishers since 1998, a long, long time. And we've invested a long time in this community. We love the community, but we just don't see any added benefit. And it's not personal to Verizon or to the people that work there, but I don't see a benefit and an increase in my satisfaction of being a homeowner in River Highlands due to having a tower in my front yard. I don't see the benefit, but I see a huge cost. Again, to Steve's point, the value of our home, again, it's not a it's not a small investment when you move into Fishers and you live here for 20 years and you have your family here and your kids here and your kids in the schools, you want to stay. And I just want to make sure that the value of our home stays and that our satisfaction of living in the home stays. And having a tower in our front yard does not add value and does not add any benefit to us living there. So I just want that to be recognized as, in addition to the other concerns that we heard from our friends and neighbors regarding health and aesthetics.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I just had one question. So, I don't know if it happened to be one of the two that, spoke, but there was a comment in the notes to Tammy about moving it to the backyard, and the response was no, because it's private property. So if a homeowner willingly wants to move or create an easement in their yard, is there a process that can be considered?
Well, from our standpoint, Jason, I mean, all telecommunication providers under this act have the ability to do what they do in public rights of way.
Right.
So I think there's less of a desire to look for a private easement. It wouldn't be something that the city regulates. And I'm sure there's other concerns that the telecommunications would have with creating private easements for accessing the poles and getting to the poles. But that would be completely between the private owners and the
To that point, I
telecommunications.
guess, Chris, from a legal perspective, our ordinance, would we have any, jurisdiction over someone doing that on private
We
property?
wouldn't, and that would be a concern of any telecommunication provider as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure we'd even, because ours is in regards to the management of the right of way, so I don't. Well, dedicate the public.
To that. I don't know.
Yeah,
just
I
asked
think
the question.
where you get into really interesting questions are like how they would access it, how they would maintain it, all that kind of stuff would probably be a challenge to say the least.
But maybe that's something that Verizon could talk to. Is there a precedent, or they work through things like that in the past in other communities, perhaps, not ours?
Good question, yeah, I don't know. Leonard, do you have any
Do you have
experience
any-
with that on the private sector? Just in case we get this question in the future.
Yes, again, Leonard Strickland for Verizon. We have had occasions in other jurisdictions where power easements and power utility poles and stuff like that have been at the rear of the properties. And typically what we see is large growth trees, inability to access it because these are serviced by bucket trucks. And to have the ability to get a bucket truck back into somebody's backyard, you know, again, I know it did come up about lots of service and maintenance. The nice thing about these is they're pretty much maintenance free. We do monitor these actively, so in the event that one does drop out of service, we will go out and service them. And again, typically we don't do these at night. That could change as our new technology comes online with our 5G home capability. We would treat that like any other service outage for internet and phone services, to where we have a typical 2-hour response time. But for the most part, we need to make sure we have accessibility for that. And there's also getting power and fiber to those locations. Easements would have to be secured for that as well. So it opens up a lot of issues. So that's why we typically avoid rear easements and private property.
Doesn't sound like it'd be an attractive option for either the resident or the Verizon.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I personally do not have an issue with the tower at, not that the two folks spoke on.
7466.
That one seems like it's pretty thoughtfully located in a place where I don't know that a resident would be adversely affected by it. I do think the other one presents challenges, but I'm not sure I know what solutions are out there to try to mitigate it. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of.
One thing also, after the call, I forgot to mention this, we have reached out to the HOA to see if they were, if they would choose to not have lights on them. So they're verifying with the residents in the area on whether or not they want lights.
See what I mean, though, Jason and Jeff? other one, I don't have any heartburn over, but the one that folks did come speak about. is
Yeah.
smack in the middle of,
Kind of looking at a larger map drawn out, I pulled it out a little bit. There's a neighborhood to the south, but you also have Allisonville Road, directly to the east of that neighborhood, or that southern cul-de-sac. So if we were to move 7421 up to the intersection of, I'm not sure what, River Highlands, Glenvista Place and River Highlands Drive, what could we do to the south, either on Allisonville Road? Because the concern was the southern part of that neighborhood down in the court. What could we do, in the southern, either on Allisonville Road to pick up a portion of that southern neighborhood, or what are we doing in the neighborhood to the south of River Highlands?
did you hear that, Tammy?
I think I understood that. Was he asking about losing the coverage on the south here if we moved it to the intersection? And that was Verizon's, stance when the question was brought up about moving it here, was the losing the homes to the south.
Right, so that's where,
What the exact coverage, what their coverage area in this, subdivision would be.
Yeah, so if you move it, I think you're talking about whatever
Glen Vista Place, yes.
But then you get into the front of the houses. So it's almost like, what if there's a rotation? Clockwise to the right. Looks like a big open area there to, north of that a little bit. And then if 7466 was moved down closer to Allisonville Road, perhaps. I'm just thinking out loud here. If you just corkscrew it to the right, 20, 30 degrees.
Yeah, Verizon probably have to go back and look at all of their coverage studies that they have.
I get it. You go further south, it gets very condensed.
Yeah. Any additional thoughts on this one? Jason or Jeff?
I'm all right with 7466. I think 7421 needs to be reevaluated.
I think it'd be good, we're obviously trying to solve it right here on the desk, and I'm not sure that we can do that, but I think what we would do, according to Jeff, is, if I hear your motion correctly, Jeff, it would be to approve the, whatever,
7466.
and then table the other one to identify an alternative solution.
Correct.
Mayor and Jeff, please excuse me, do we want to table them both? Because if one's fixated, it could impact 7421's opportunity to move.
The only thing I would say is I think we owe it to Verizon to let them know that that is a viable location, the one that we are willing to approve. Whether they decide to move it or not is.
Okay, then they could
always
withdraw
come
the
back,
application and ask for a new location?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
All right.
Jeff, is your motion to approve, whatever, 7466 and table the other?
Affirmative.
So I think that was a motion. Is that a second, Jason?
Yeah, second.
Second by Jason. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. So for the folks that spoke, Tammy will go back and work with Verizon to identify other solutions, and we'll be communicating directly with you guys so that you're aware of everything as we move forward through the process. Yep, thank you. Any additional items, Chris? I think that's enough for today. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.